Part 1. I recently started working in IT for a restaurant chain whose headquarters had some very strange rules. Just a few weeks after graduating from college and moving back in with my parents, I landed my first full-time job. Nothing too fancy, just an IT position for a restaurant chain. It was an entry-level gig, but good enough not to be completely dismissed. The work didn't seem bad, and it was in my field. However, it was also clear that many non-IT people could do this job. Still, I figured it would help me start saving money before I had to pay all my own bills. The hiring process took less than a week. The very day I submitted my application, I received a message asking if I could interview the next day. Surprised by their quick response, I agreed and met them the following morning. The two people who interviewed me were quite friendly. I answered their questions, asked a few of my own, and left after just 15 minutes. Less than a day later, I received another message saying they were preparing to send an offer letter. Although I wanted to question why the hiring process was so rushed, I reassured myself that perhaps they needed to replace someone who had just left. While that was partly true, I still wish I had thought things through more carefully. A few days passed, and I drove to the company for my first shift. I arrived at 7:30 a.m., even though my online schedule clearly stated I started at 7:45 a.m. The parking lot was empty, and the chains still secured the entrances. I thought this might be a good time to quickly review the employee handbook I had been emailed and printed out. Pulling the stack of documents from my bag, I skimmed most of the content, as it was mainly basic procedures and information, like any other job. I paid almost no attention to them until I saw a page printed in large, bold letters. "Please read before your first shift." These must be the really important rules, I thought to myself, the kind you get fired for if you break them. Not wanting to make a mistake on my first day, I flipped to the next page and started reading. "Thank you for choosing to work at Company X. While your work is vital to the business, our top priority is your safety and well-being. Please read and follow these rules at all times. No rule is to be taken lightly, and if violated, in the most likely scenario, you will be terminated. 1. If you are on the earliest shift, you may be scheduled for 8:00 a.m. If you find yourself scheduled earlier, it is a system error. Do not enter the building until after 8:00 a.m. Similarly, if working the evening shift, you will never be scheduled past 10:00 p.m. 2. The closing procedure requires all employees to lock the doors and exit the building by 10:21 p.m. at the absolute latest. Do not stay after this time for any reason. The alarm system will automatically activate, and you will be unable to exit if you get trapped inside. If you do get trapped, immediately go to the server room, lock the door, and stay there until 8:00 a.m. 3. If you are on the evening shift, ensure all 3 parking lot entrances are securely chained before you leave. Before chaining the last one, start your car with the door open and leave the premises immediately after you secure it. 4. Do not open the door labeled "Private" next to the second-floor restroom. Inside are devices that are not only dangerous, but also cannot withstand exposure to the outside environment. If you see this door open, do not close it. Report it to the CTO or a member of the cleaning crew. They will handle it. 5. If an employee you do not recognize approaches you and asks about fixing Tory's computer, politely reply, "I will create a support ticket for that," and leave immediately. Maintain eye contact until you turn around a corner. If they approach you while you are sitting at your desk, maintain eye contact after replying and call the CTO. 6. Unlike Rule 5, if someone calls asking about fixing Tory's computer, do not respond. Remain silent and wait for them to hang up. Do not take your eyes off your computer during this time and ignore any urge to look away. 7. All calls between 7:06 p.m. and 8:17 a.m. must be ignored. No one needs your help during this time. Restaurants know they should not call during those hours. 8. If you return to your desk and find an unusually tall man sitting at your desk typing, leave the area as discreetly as possible and do not return for at least 30 minutes. There is a spare desk in the furthest corner of the accounting room that you can use temporarily until 30 minutes have passed. 9. If the man discovers you and asks for help, stand a few steps away from the desk and calmly guide him through troubleshooting until he dismisses you. Usually, the issue is simply reinstalling the browser he has deleted. Absolutely do not give incorrect instructions. After he dismisses you, apply Rule 8. 10. Do not run in the office unless you are sure you are in immediate danger. 11. If at any time you hear running in the downstairs hallway, immediately close and lock the main door to the IT department. As per Rule 10, no one should be running unless there is an emergency. 12. If something knocks on the IT door, ignore it. Any employee needing to enter a locked room will know the door code. Do not listen to any sounds claiming they are trapped outside. 13. Occasionally, a file named New Department Procedures, MPV, will appear on your desktop. If this happens, close your eyes and open the file. You will hear sounds as if they are escaping your computer and echoing around you. Ignore them until they stop completely and wait an additional 30 seconds before opening your eyes. At this point, your computer will have a blue-green screen and will need to be restarted several times to function normally. 14. If at any time you are confused about a rule or suspect you have violated something, speak with the CTO or a member of the cleaning crew. If you see anything that seems strange or out of place, report it immediately. Following these rules will ensure your time at Company X is both rewarding and valuable. I stared at the paper, unsure what to think. A part of me felt this was just an elaborate prank my boss wanted to play on the new guy. I glanced at the car clock, which read 7:46 a.m. My car was still the only one in the lot, and no other vehicle had passed since I arrived. There was no way they'd expect the new person to open the building alone. So why was I the only one here? After skimming the rules a second time, my eyes stopped at Rule 1. It was strange that they would make a scheduling error on my very first day, especially after emphasizing so clearly that I would never work that early. I looked across the street at the office building. The windows were still dark, but then I noticed, at the far end of the second floor, a window with a curtain that had just fallen, swaying gently. I decided to wait in my car until everyone else arrived at 8:01 a.m. It's now been about 3 months since I started the job. Somehow, I've survived so far without any serious incidents, thanks to those rules I always carry with me. By now, I've had enough encounters and close calls to be genuinely afraid and adhere to everything strictly. Almost everything has happened exactly as the rules described, and following them has kept me safe. My closest call was in my 4th week, during my first evening shift alone. I had to spend the night in the server room, which was both physically grueling and mentally tormenting, something I would never wish on anyone. Imagine a game of hide-and-seek where you choose to hide in a freezer, except the seekers aren't your friends, but them. Yet, strangely, the next morning I felt quite calm. Perhaps the quiet ending to that horrifying event made me realize that as long as I stuck to the rules, living here wasn't too difficult. And my boss gave me a hefty raise after that night. I started to think that as long as I followed the rules, nothing too bad would happen. I quickly realized how wrong I was. About a week ago, the company hired a new employee in the accounting department, and today, he ruined everything. Part 2. For those who asked me to post Part 2, here it is. I apologize for not writing more in the first post, but we're still dealing with the aftermath of my careless colleague. Strangely, my boss was quite impressed with how I handled the situation, and that led to even more peculiar discoveries. But I'll detail those in another part. One more thing I want to clarify is how the rules operate. As I understand it, every rule applies to everyone here. Any employee could encounter the tall man at their desk, and anyone could receive the New Department Procedure, MPV, file on their screen. No one says this directly, but from their behavior, it's clear. Furthermore, the story I'm about to tell nearly proves it. About the new employee, I'll call him Kevin. Kevin is the type of person who always believes he knows best. If he attended a scientific lecture about the universe, he'd speak up and tell the presenter how the universe really works and how black holes operate. It doesn't mean he's a bad person, but his approach to everything bothered me from day one. Yesterday, before everything went wrong, I was sitting at my desk as usual. At that time, I was the only one in it on shift, but the morning passed relatively quietly, with only 1 or 2 calls from the restaurants. Suddenly, I heard footsteps approaching the IT section. A few seconds later, Kevin strolled in. "Hey, someone needs help. They said Tory's computer is acting up, so I told them I'd find it." I froze. There's no one named Tory here. Kevin had that certainty he always projected. What if there isn't? What if they? "There's no one named Tory in this office, Kevin. What did you tell that person?" I started to feel tense. Deep down, I sensed something terrible was about to happen. He sniffed. "I just said exactly what I just told you." From the hallway, I heard the shuffling of approaching footsteps. It clearly wasn't running, so I didn't know if it was time to rush and slam the door shut yet. The last thing I wanted was to mess things up and break a rule. As the shuffling grew closer, I turned to Kevin. "Don't say anything, I'll handle it." I was completely bluffing because up until now, whenever I encountered a situation related to this rule, I just replied, "I'll create a support ticket for that," and retreated as quickly as possible. But now, I had stepped into completely uncharted territory. A man appeared in the doorway. He wore regular business attire, unlike any other employee. His expression was blank, staring intently at me with unwavering eyes, and I stared back, unblinking. I hoped he would just ask about Tory's computer, and then I could say the usual line and get away. But after about 30 seconds of being enveloped by that unblinking gaze, I felt my strength draining, and I started fumbling for my desk phone. Still, I absolutely dared not take my eyes off him. I ignored the dancing shadows at the edge of my vision, tempting me to look away. Kevin looked annoyed when he saw me pick up the phone. "All right, if you won't help, I will. I'm sure I can fix it myself." I didn't reply. I had to admit I was scared. After the first crisis from breaking a rule, I couldn't bring myself to get close to that boundary of error again. The shadows grew clearer, as if they had a life of their own. Panic crept into my mind. My only thought was that looking away would be an irreversible mistake. I saw Kevin walk toward the man and gesture toward the door. "Come on, I'll take care of it for you." As soon as Kevin started talking, the man's gaze shifted to Kevin, and instantly, those shadows vanished from my peripheral vision. I blinked a few times to clear my head, and when I looked up, both men were gone. "Damn it!" I leaped from my chair, rushed out the main door of the IT department, still holding my phone. I knew I wasn't allowed to run around, but letting a colleague be dragged to some terrible place with that man was probably the most urgent situation I'd ever encountered. As I exited the hallway, I turned my head quickly and saw it in the distance, next to the second-floor restroom. The door labeled "Private" was wide open. In my haste to find Kevin, I wasn't prepared for the sight when I looked inside. In fact, I don't think anyone could be prepared to witness this. Behind the door stretched an endless hallway, shrouded in darkness. The only light that entered was from a few windows along the left wall, draped with curtains, allowing only a faint trickle of sunlight. To the right were dozens, even hundreds, of doors also stretching endlessly into the gloom. But most striking was the black mass standing motionless in the middle of the hallway, about 30 meters from me. It had the indistinct shape of a human, with an upper body too small for its stature and grotesquely long limbs. Although I could only see its outline, its eyes glowed a somber yellow in the darkness. Below its eyes, a white halo flickered, what I could only guess were teeth bared in a monstrous, sharp-toothed grin. In my head, I knew I had to call the CTO, but just as I raised my phone, the most terrifying scream I had ever heard echoed through the space. I flinched, snapping my head up. Just a few seconds after glancing down at my phone, the monster had taken a giant leap, not a distance a normal person could cover. I was terrified, imagining what it would do if it escaped. I knew I had to close the door, but there was no way. Even if I just ran to the middle of the hallway and it charged at the door, its speed would utterly overwhelm me. I turned my back, ran headlong toward the IT area, slamming the door shut behind me. I could only pray that the pounding footsteps and the sound of the door being thrown would alert others to lock themselves in their rooms. But as that thing began to furiously smash and claw at the IT door, I realized I was probably the only one who needed to worry now, having strayed so far from the rules. Finally, I called my boss. He picked up almost immediately, and I recounted the entire story. "Did you take your eyes off that man at any point?" he asked after I finished. "No, sir." "Good, then you're all right. Don't worry about Kevin or the door. We'll handle it." Although I couldn't stand Kevin's attitude, I didn't want anything bad to happen to him. Will he be fired? He paused for a moment, then replied, "Let's hope so." Then he instructed me to stay in the office with the door closed until further notice and hung up. His words echoed in my head as I sat there, listening to the pounding outside gradually subside. Although I knew I probably couldn't have stopped Kevin no matter how hard I tried, the guilt of abandoning him weighed heavily on my mind. While I was lost in thought, I suddenly heard slow footsteps entering the office. Looking up, I saw Kevin. He looked almost unharmed, just a little disheveled. We looked at each other without speaking. I almost blurted out that I was glad he was alive, but Kevin interrupted. "Kevin needs help fixing his computer," he said in a monotone, lacking his usual confidence. He stared unblinkingly, maintaining perfect eye contact. My throat was dry as I replied, "I'll create a support ticket for that." Kevin stood silently for a few more seconds, then nodded and slowly retreated until he was out of sight. Although I knew it wasn't wise, I left my desk and followed him into the main IT room, but the door was still locked. Kevin had vanished without a trace. I returned to my desk, intending to call the CTO, when two emails suddenly appeared in my inbox. The first email was from HR. To the employees of Company X. Some changes have been applied to the rules. Most remain the same, but the following items have been modified. 5. If any employee approaches and asks about fixing Tory's or Kevin's computer, politely reply, "I will create a support ticket for that," and leave immediately. Maintain eye contact until you are out of sight around a corner. If they approach you while you are at your desk and do not leave after you have replied, maintain eye contact and call the CTO. He will guide you further. 6. Unlike Rule 5, if someone calls asking about fixing Tory's or Kevin's computer, do not respond. Remain silent and wait for them to hang up. Do not look away from your screen during this time and ignore any urge to break eye contact. Additionally, the following rule has been added. 14. If at any time you see yellow eyes in a mirror or a reflection from a glass door, immediately look away and avoid dark areas for the next hour. If you have any questions about these changes, please contact the CTO or the cleaning crew. The second email was from my boss. "We will begin sending you to restaurants to troubleshoot issues starting next week. Before then, you will receive an email containing mandatory procedures for working at the stores. Please read them carefully before your second shift." And that was it. Part 3. Before I start, I want to thank everyone for reading my posts and for the comments about Kevin, or rather, about how he brought it all upon himself. While I don't disagree with that sentiment, the guilt will probably stay with me for a while. Anyway, I'll continue my work and update you on what's happening. Another thing I've noticed is that there are some speculations surrounding the rules and their meanings. To be honest, I'm still not sure what happens if you break most of the rules. I've been almost ridiculously lucky, so even though I've made a few minor mistakes here and there, I've only had a handful of truly terrifying experiences. One of them involved Kevin. Even though it just happened, I've seen Kevin again. From what I've witnessed, I guess anyone who violates the rule about answering a request to fix Tory's computer ends up like him. When I saw Kevin for the second time, I couldn't help but wonder if any part of his humanity remained, or perhaps it wasn't Kevin anymore. As for the new rule about yellow eyes, to be fair, it's more of a nuisance than anything else. There are countless glass surfaces around the office, most of them unavoidable, and almost every day those eyes appear on any glass surface they can. If you're unlucky enough to see these eyes while needing to use the restroom, you're pretty much done. Strangely, the lights in both restrooms in the building are always off when someone enters, even though everyone swears they haven't touched the switch. Also, some people have wondered about the office's unusual schedule. I truly just want to forget the time I was stuck here after 10:21 p.m., but since many want to know, I'll explain what I understand. The general rule is not to be in the building before 8:00 a.m. or after 10:21 p.m. The reason we are never scheduled past 10:00 p.m. is to allow enough time to complete the closing procedure correctly while avoiding the danger of staying too long. Even if someone is absorbed in work, they can still leave in time. As for who modifies the schedule, I don't know. It's clearly not my boss or anyone else in the company. My best guess is that some external entity has learned how to use computers and is trying to lure us into staying during those unholy hours. And believe me, you do not want to be stuck there. The sounds that thing made still echo in my head every night. It mimics the voices of people I know to trick me into showing myself, spewing sinister threats interspersed with laughter, the illusions it plants in my mind. Those were the 10 most terrifying hours of my life. Anyway, I don't want to dwell on that, especially with the new troubles brewing. Last week, after the Kevin incident, my boss emailed to say I would start being sent to restaurants to troubleshoot issues directly. It sounded both exciting and worrying. On one hand, I get a chance to escape the office and do fieldwork in a completely new environment, but when he mentioned in-store procedures, I immediately shuddered with anxiety. True to his word, HR sent me a list of rules for the restaurants. While not as numerous as the office rules, some of them were truly terrifying. Here's the content of the email sent to Company X's IT department. Before visiting any of our facilities, please read and commit to memory the following procedures, as well as the office rules. Adhere strictly to them at all times when working at the restaurant. Violations will have extremely serious consequences, and by now, you probably have some idea of what that entails. 1. Always use the company car to travel to facilities. If for some reason the company car is unavailable, do not use your personal car. This action is considered disrespectful, and in the most favorable scenario, you will lose your car. 2. Customers in the restaurant are always safe. If at any time you feel something tells you otherwise, do not trust your eyes. Leave the restaurant immediately, get into the company car with the heater on full blast. Wait 15 minutes. If you see all the customers in the restaurant staring at you through the window, drive back to the office. Don't worry about tools or equipment left behind, we can replace them. 3. If you are forced to climb a ladder, inform the store manager. They will remind staff not to disturb you at this time. If while on the ladder you hear someone call your name or ask if you need help, do not respond. Ignore them. Complete your work and descend the ladder with your eyes closed. If you feel a presence behind you after your feet touch the ground, stand still, keeping your eyes closed until it leaves. 4. Always count the steps you have climbed. If you find yourself in a situation mentioned in Rule 3 and realize, upon descending, that you have taken more steps than you originally climbed, climb back up until you reach the top of the ladder. Wait 30 seconds, then try descending again. Repeat this process until you are certain you have taken only the correct number of steps you climbed. 5. Do not touch raw meat in the restaurant. Its smell will attract them to you. 6. There may be an unusually tall man, identical to the one who appeared at headquarters, in the manager's office of any facility. If you encounter him, do not look at him for more than 3 seconds. If you accidentally look too long, leave the building as quickly as possible, find a clear road, and drive as fast as you can. Do not look in the rearview mirror until you no longer hear heavy breathing. 7. Do not swear in the restaurant. It can anger customers and lead to an uncontrollable incident. 8. If a customer approaches and asks you something in a language you do not understand, other than Spanish, reply, campus non-venet. They will nod slowly and leave the restaurant. If you answer incorrectly, you will see a woman in a black pantsuit sitting in the corner of the restaurant with an unbelievably wide smile. Leave the building immediately and return to the office. You must go before her mouth begins to split open. We understand these rules are much more complex than the standard set of office rules. However, the frequency of incidents at restaurants is not as high, and we trust that you have learned to adhere strictly to these types of procedures. If you have any questions, please contact the CTO. After reading the email, I didn't know what to think. I had faced a life-or-death situation once when I was stuck after hours at the office, and very possibly again during the Kevin incident. And it clearly didn't take a genius to understand why they were only sending me to restaurants now. Compared to this mess of rules, the anonymous entity changing the schedule looked like a child wearing a white sheet pretending to be a ghost on Halloween. I thought I'd have a bit more time to mentally prepare and memorize the rules before I had to go. And until today, things seemed to be going smoothly enough. However, this morning, I received a message from my boss while at work. The store in C City needs you to replace a broken camera. You need to go tomorrow. Overtime will be provided. I had just fallen into a heap of trouble, the worst since starting with this company. Perhaps the universe wasn't pleased with me boasting about my luck these past few months, because all that good fortune immediately vanished the moment I stepped into the restaurant. My task was quite simple: replace a broken camera near the front cashier. The cause had been identified as solely the camera itself, so I just needed to remove the old one and install the new one. No new cables to run, no wires to connect, nothing complicated at all. In and out in about 15 minutes. This restaurant was about a 30-minute drive from the office. I went straight after lunch, tossing my tool bag into the back seat of the company car and climbing into the driver's seat. Suddenly, I wondered why such a simple task wasn't left to the company's repairman, but I couldn't deny that when dealing with sensitive equipment installed by the IT department itself, it probably made more sense for IT folks to handle it. The trip was smooth. I sped down the highway, chanting "Tempus non venit" to myself, half excited, half anxious. Finally, I'd get to see another side of the job. True, there were many rules to mind, but they themselves said that the strange occurrences at restaurants weren't as frequent as in the office. Thinking that relieved me somewhat. I tried to stay optimistic the whole way. Once done, this would simply be a new experience. Honestly, I also hoped I'd have a partner for my first time at a store. I wasn't sure if that would change how the rules worked, but at least someone else's presence would make me feel more secure. Unfortunately, I was working this shift alone, and the camera was too important to delay. When I parked in front of the restaurant, nothing immediately made me uneasy. The place was still busy because it was still lunchtime, and through the window, I saw the staff working with bored expressions. Nothing unusual, in short. I got out of the car and went inside to check the camera. The smell of chicken wafted up my nose, making my stomach rumble even though I'd eaten only half an hour ago. I ignored the craving and went behind the counter. A few employees glanced at me, but seeing the company logo on my jacket, they left me to it. "Damn," I muttered, looking up at where the camera needed to be replaced. It was higher than I thought. I had hoped to just borrow a chair, as one Redditor suggested, to avoid using a ladder, but at that position, it was impossible. I went back to the car to get the ladder and my tool bag. After setting it up, I went to find the manager. I found her in the back office, arranging next week's schedule. "Excuse me, I'm from it," I said after a gentle knock to get her attention. "I'm here to fix the camera, so I'll be on the ladder for a bit." Her attitude made me a little worried. She seemed surprised to see me there. "I'll tell the staff not to disturb you," she replied, standing up quickly. "Just don't take too long." I didn't know if she said that because she was afraid I'd disrupt business or concerned for my safety. I just hoped it wasn't the latter. After everyone was reminded not to bother me, I started working. The towering steps loomed before me, making me nervous as I stepped onto the first rung. 1, I climbed 4 steps, stopped, placed both feet on the 4th rung, and silently repeated the number in my head. I planned to count down when descending, and when I reached 0, I'd be sure I was on the floor. Reassuring myself that I was well prepared, I began unscrewing the camera from its mount. It came off quite easily. I then unplugged the single cable connected to it. There wasn't enough space at the top of the ladder for all the screws, screwdriver, new camera, and old camera, so I decided to carry the camera I had just removed. As I was counting the steps to descend, a soft voice called out, distracting me. "Do you need help with those things?" I immediately froze, closing my eyes tightly. Both my feet were still on the ladder, and in my surprise, I forgot which rung I was on. I guessed the safest way was to climb back up, wait a bit, then try descending again. I stepped back to my original position, feeling for the top of the ladder to confirm I had climbed exactly 4 steps as before. The height was exactly the same. I breathed a sigh of relief. After 30 seconds passed, I tried descending again, this time with my eyes closed. 3, 2, 1, 0. Foolishly, when I counted 0, I put my foot down as if sure the floor was right there. My foot swung into empty space. I lost my balance. My other foot was already ready to touch the ground, so my whole body swayed. I tried to hold onto the rung above to avoid falling, but my shoe tip hit another rung, and as a result, I completely slid off the ladder, falling a few feet to the ground. I stumbled a bit but regained my balance. Finally, I was no longer touching the ladder. The feeling was like stepping from the freezing cold outdoors into a warm, heated building. That's how I felt the transition. The moment I fell from the ladder, all sounds in the restaurant suddenly compressed, as if an invisible door separated me from them. In this place, nothing made a sound anymore, only a strange, intense heat and an incredible pressure crushing my mind, just like someone pressing their hands on your face, squeezing your temples. Then, from somewhere behind me, I heard a faint scuttling sound, perhaps like small dog claws on the floor, but the sound quickly grew, becoming strong footsteps. Too many feet, too monstrous, stomping loudly on the floor. In desperation, I reached out, searching for the ladder, still refusing to open my eyes. Fortunately, I hadn't fallen far from the ladder, and in a few seconds, my hands found the cold metal rungs. I immediately placed one foot on the lowest rung and climbed up as the pounding footsteps closed in on me. I don't know how many rungs I climbed, but it was certainly much more than the 2 extra steps I had missed earlier. I kept climbing, perhaps twice the actual height of the ladder, until the pressure vanished, the familiar sounds of the restaurant returned, and the pounding footsteps faded away. I exhaled, realizing I had been holding my breath. I stood at the top of the ladder for a few minutes, waiting for my heart rate to slow down. The thought crossed my mind of what would have happened if I hadn't grabbed onto the ladder in time. I immediately dismissed that thought. If I quickly finished my task, I could go back to the office and forget all about this. Honestly, even Kevin might be better than these monstrous things. I regained my composure, counted the steps to descend again. Luckily, I landed correctly on the floor when I counted 0. I didn't feel anything behind me, and when I opened my eyes, everything was normal. I put the old camera in my tool bag, muttering under my breath. Looking back at these bizarre events, if those demons could read minds, I'd probably be dead. I didn't even have the presence of mind to care about that. I took the new camera out of its box and climbed the 4 steps again. As I started screwing the camera base into place, another soft voice spoke from behind. This time, I was less startled and continued to ignore it. I didn't even clearly hear what they said. I didn't understand the language, so why pay attention? Just as I put the cover on the now fixed base, I suddenly realized I only speak fluent English, a little French, and have enough exposure to Spanish to understand bits and pieces, though I'm not good at it or able to use it to save my life. But in that moment, with my limited Spanish, I realized what had just been said was not Spanish, and certainly not English. I fixed my gaze on the camera lens, aware that I wasn't prepared for a situation of rules layered on rules. Should I reply with the classic, tempus non venit, or ignore it and hope the latter rule would take precedence? The moment I looked through the camera's lens, I saw a distorted reflection on the floor below, directly behind the ladder. Looking up at me was a man in a gray suit with a blue tie. His facial features were hard to determine due to the distorting effect of the glass, but most prominent were his stark white teeth and an unnervingly forced smile. Even if the reflection distorted him like a funhouse mirror, I was sure he wasn't a normal human. I practically threw the rest of the camera into place. Once done, I just needed to go to the manager's room to check if the camera was working. I quickly stuffed the screwdriver into my pocket, closed my eyes tightly, and counted the steps down. Luckily, this time I didn't step into another damned dimension. Landing on the floor, I waited a few seconds before opening my eyes, ensuring no one was standing close to me. Everything seemed normal. I quickly returned to the manager's room, confirmed the camera was operational, then went out to pack up my things. But as I stepped out of the kitchen area, I saw her. She sat in the furthest corner of the restaurant, dressed in a black pantsuit, standing out in the crowd. Her face was distorted with a Joker-like smile, both corners of her mouth torn open, blood dripping down her chin and staining her clothes. She stared intently at me, her smile growing wider and wider, stretching the flesh on her cheeks, creating a terrifying sight. My first instinct was to glance at my tools, wondering if I should leave them behind. Then I realized clearly I had to. I turned on my heel and ran straight for the door. As I looked back, I saw the tables near her were now also looking at me. Without hesitation, I pushed open the front door, darted to the truck, and jumped inside. Pressing the gas pedal, I backed out of the parking spot. I couldn't help but look back at the restaurant one last time. In all the windows, pairs of eyes were watching me. They followed me as I backed up and turned onto the main road. As I merged onto the highway, I immediately called my boss. "Hello, I think I just violated rule number 8, I blurted out, forgetting to greet him. When he didn't respond, I continued. Someone spoke to me in a language that wasn't English or Spanish while I was on the ladder, and I didn't respond. Now what's going to happen? Finally, he replied. Did her mouth split open? Yes, sir. All right, I'll arrange to temporarily close that restaurant. His voice was calm to the point of being chilling. On your way back to the office, do not look at anything in your peripheral vision, no matter what you see or think it is. Just look straight at the road. Call me when you arrive, but don't get out of the car. Yes, sir. We hung up almost immediately. A car crept up on my left, the driver's seat almost parallel to mine. Even without directly looking, I could feel its gaze fixed on me. I turned the music up loud and ignored everything for the rest of the drive, even when another car approached on my right, even when I felt the gaze of the car behind me in the rearview mirror, even when the seat next to me was no longer empty. I kept my head facing forward, trying to guess how serious my mistake had been. When I reached the company parking lot, I called my boss, my eyes fixed forward, not daring to turn to the black-suited guest sitting in the passenger seat. He picked up on the first ring. The passenger side door of your car faces the side entrance of the building, right? Yes, sir. All right, park as far away as possible but directly in line with that door. When you get there, don't take your eyes off the front but unbuckle your seatbelt and open your car door. If you see a bright red glow near the side door, slowly advance towards it, always keeping your car in your peripheral vision. You'll have to walk sideways, don't stop, don't run, and don't look directly at the car. I was stunned. My boss was always serious, but now I clearly heard the tension in his voice. Whatever was happening was definitely real, and I suspected I had no room for error. I followed his instructions, trying to stay calm. You have about 15 seconds before I get to the door. When you start walking, you'll want to turn your head and look back. You'll feel something swirling around you, but don't look. Keep focusing forward and don't look back. I remained silent. In my peripheral vision, I saw my companion still sitting motionless, its head tilted to one side, its gaze fixed on me. That creature stared intently at me with chilling eyes. Then I noticed something moving in the corner of my left eye. A few seconds later, a red light flashed. I immediately opened the car door and slowly but decisively stepped out. I performed a crab-like sideways walk to cross the parking lot. In a normal situation, this sight would have been hilarious. The red light swayed a bit, then stood still. I tried to focus on it, not letting the car out of my vision, but the urge to look back was truly terrifying. I still felt that awful, piercing gaze, even though I never faced it directly. It was as if it saw through me from the parking spot. I was halfway across the parking lot when the shadows started dancing at the very edge of my vision, near the car, reminiscent of my encounter with Kevin. Something lightly touched the back of my neck, making me jump, almost turning around. The awareness of danger, of having to clearly see the enemy, weighed heavily on my mind, but I forced myself to continue walking sideways. About 20 more seconds until I reached the door, but it felt like an eternity. Finally, I reached the doorknob, squeezed through in a precarious stance, and my boss immediately pulled the door shut. Less than a second later, I heard the truck door slam shut. "It won't come in here, will it?" I gasped. "Not in here, we're safe." What the hell was that? My boss pulled down his blindfold, giving me a look that said, "You're better off not knowing." But perhaps he thought after that terrifying experience, I deserved to know something. "No one really knows what it is," he confessed. "We only know one thing. It, or rather, that thing, latches onto the person it chooses. If you don't answer correctly to the question it asks, it will start to invade your mind. That's why you suddenly saw the woman with the split smile in the restaurant. But if it's just in my head, why did you need a blindfold?" He shook his head as if I were a clueless child. "You've worked here long enough to know it's never too careful. I've seen it appear to me after it latched onto another employee. The last thing we need is for it to spread to more people in the office." The way he described it, latching onto people, made my stomach churn with unease. "So, how long will it latch onto me?" "Not more than a few days. If you see it, ignore it. It can only harm you if you return to the restaurant where it started, or if you pay too much attention to it." My head was spinning. The thought of seeing that monstrous smile lurking at the edge of my vision, even in my own home, made me want to stay at the company. My boss had a different perspective. "I'm giving you 3 paid days off. Don't worry, it won't be deducted from your vacation days. He saw me stiffen at that, so he tried to reassure me. It wasn't that he hadn't cared about employees before, but this time, it sounded like he was genuinely trying to persuade me. Still, I felt the next 3 days would be pure torture. Then he let me go. He walked with me through the parking lot, warning me not to let my eyes wander and catch sight of things I shouldn't. As I got into my car, he waved goodbye. I left the company, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts about 3 days of house arrest, haunted by a terrifying entity. To be honest, those 3 days unfolded exactly as I feared. I just stayed home, played games, and lied to my parents about why I was off work for so long. Sometimes, in my room, I'd see something moving in the dark corner, but I'd keep my eyes glued to the screen, ignoring it, even as the shadow grew closer each day, until by the third day, it brazenly filled the room. On the fourth day, I was overjoyed to return to work, hoping to escape this haunting. But as I stepped out the door, I saw the shadow sitting right in the driver's seat of my car. I gasped, retreated back into the house, and called my boss. The conversation wasn't much better. He told me to wait a few more days and report back if the situation improved. It's now been almost a week since I went to the restaurant, and it's still here. Sometimes I can't even use the restroom or shower because it appears. I almost don't even pay attention to that monster, disguised as an elegant businesswoman anymore. I always try to avoid looking, but it doesn't let up. And no, I won't call it she. Doing so would be an insult to women. Whatever I'm dealing with is certainly not human. Occasionally, in the middle of the night, I wake up, open my eyes, and see a silhouette standing in the corner of the room. I blink, and it's gone, or so I think. In reality, it just changed its hiding spot. This doesn't really make it harder for me to sleep, because I know closing my eyes is safe. But waking up is terrible. Waking up and seeing that thing in the corner of the hallway, having to brush my teeth without looking in the mirror, or talking to my parents without turning my head while wondering if they see the uninvited guest sitting in the living room. I just wish it would end soon so I can go back to normal work. The end. Long time no see, everyone. Yes, I'm still alive. Sorry for not updating in a few weeks, but I'm sure you understand why. Spending a week living with a supernatural demon lurking in your personal space isn't an easy experience. Before I detail what happened, I want to say a few things first. Firstly, I left my job at Company X. No, I didn't leave in conflict or an argument. After talking with my boss, he agreed with me that it would be better for me to stay away from anything related to the company in the future. He even gave me a bonus before I left, if you can call it that. Perhaps it was more like a bribe or an apology for the horrors I had to witness. Secondly, that disgusting creature is now gone. I'll explain more about that shortly. Thirdly, leaving the company wasn't as simple as I thought. There was a condition attached, and I'll address that in a bit. One more thing I want to quickly mention is about the comments from last time. Someone pointed out that I did actually swear in the restaurant. I tend to blurt out expletives quite frequently without realizing it, as it's gradually become part of my everyday vocabulary. So, I wasn't surprised that I didn't notice it while standing in the restaurant or when writing the post. I asked my boss if the swearing had anything to do with a series of rules activating in a short period, especially since he had previously said that incidents at restaurants were less frequent. He explained that some entities are very sensitive to swearing, viewing it as disrespect. Perhaps I offended them, and they decided to teach me a lesson. Now, moving on to my uninvited roommate. I hoped the first week with it was the worst, but my luck wasn't that good. Although no one mentioned it, my guess is that touching the creature is an extremely dangerous idea. Around day 8, I called my boss again, asking what would happen if I accidentally bumped into it. He didn't have an answer, just sternly told me not to even think about it. Imagine having to avoid touching someone, not looking at them, and pretending not to be aware of their presence. If this sounds like torture, it truly is a form of torture, and that thing understood it perfectly. It happened one night when I woke up with a start, catching a blurry shape in the corner of the room. I ignored it, rolled over onto my side facing the wall, feeling safer, even though I knew I had my back to it. Up until then, it had never actively attacked, so I had no reason to believe it would change now. I woke up still facing the wall, faint light filtering through the blinds. I reached out for my phone, something I had started keeping right on the bed in case of an emergency. Seeing it wasn't yet 8:00 a.m., I sighed softly and planned to roll over to sleep for another hour, but something stopped me before I could fully turn. The part of the mattress I thought was a long familiar dip turned out to be much deeper, like when you sit on a soft sofa and someone else sits right next to you. I started to panic. Even without turning, I could feel those eyes burning into the back of my neck. My palms were sweaty. I found it harder to control my breathing. The idea of another hour of sleep suddenly lost all its appeal. There was no gentle way out. I took a deep breath and threw off the covers as usual to sit up. The problem was, my usual exit was blocked, and as I glanced around the room, I caught it in my peripheral vision. It was right there, staring, smiling at me. I tried to act as natural as possible, slowly pulling the blanket down to the foot of the bed, letting it fall to the floor. Then I gently slid my hips to the edge of the bed to put my feet down. Without hesitation, I left the room and started my morning routine as usual. The first 2 hours of the day passed without incident. I tried to avoid my room, afraid of facing it. Instead, I went down to the kitchen, ate breakfast, and watched videos on my phone. But by 11 a.m., I started to get bored. I thought perhaps I could run upstairs and grab my Nintendo Switch to kill time. It was quite close to the bed, meaning I'd have to be a little careful, but I had watched all the shows and YouTube videos, and sitting around waiting for this monster to appear somewhere and glare at me was just as boring as sleeping in the same bed with it. So, I decided to risk it. As I stepped onto the stairs, I already felt uneasy. Yes, the situation was already beyond abnormal, but I had that gut feeling that I was entering something I shouldn't mess with. I decided if anything strange happened, I'd get in my car and leave the house immediately. But when I entered the room, there was no dramatic sight. No creature, no feeling of being watched. However, something was still wrong. I cautiously walked across the room, car keys in hand, and put on my shoes. As I turned back to grab the switch, I saw it standing, completely blocking the doorway, but it wasn't just silently smiling. It was making a horrific, clacking KKKKK sound, and even through my peripheral vision, I noticed its shoulders shaking with the sound. Then came the sound of tearing flesh, though the laughter continued. I heard a gurgling, wet sound, as if its mouth was full of liquid. Then it took a step towards me. I don't know what made me snap at that moment, but this monstrous creature had haunted me for almost 2 weeks, silently watching and smiling with hatred, and now it had become a real threat as it took that step. I felt I had no escape, so instead I charged. Without thinking, I ran headlong straight into it. This time, I didn't need to avoid its gaze or pretend not to see it, and when I saw it clearly, sheer terror surged along with a rush of adrenaline. The woman's face looked like it had been put through a wood chipper and then crudely stitched back together, a creation that, while vaguely human-like, no one could mistake for a person. A quick glance was enough to know it was something else. Despite being terrified, I knew stopping would be suicide. I pushed harder, throwing my entire body weight into it. It flew into the hallway, slamming against the wall. Blood splattered from its mouth and tattered smile. I didn't wait to see if it would get up. I rushed down the stairs, opened the front door, and ran outside. As I sprinted across the yard towards my car, I realized getting into the car was too risky. Before, it had calmly climbed into my car while I was driving without any warning. If it got into my car, I was done for sure. With no other option, I ran headlong down the residential street. There was a small shopping area nearby. I couldn't think of any other destination. I swear, as I ran past houses, I constantly saw things in my peripheral vision: a figure darting behind a bush, a shadow slithering under a car. I ignored it all and ran straight to the shopping area. I walked into a relatively crowded coffee shop, finding the most open seat possible. In my opinion, that was the safest approach now. After glancing around to ensure there were no suspicious faces, I called my boss. "Hello, are you all right? You sound like you just ran a marathon." "I am fine," I said, trying to catch my breath, "but I think I just caused a huge mess." I told him everything. He listened in silence, not interrupting or asking why I acted that way. Finally, he let out a sigh. "You have to find a way to make it haunt someone else," he said, his voice heavy. "What? No, I can't put someone else through that." "You don't have a choice," he snapped, startling me, at least enough to silence me, and let him continue. "I can send an employee from headquarters to your location. Many of them have dealt with situations like this and are capable of setting things right." But if it's already furious because of me, what chance do they have? It's like the cycle will restart when it gets someone new. From what we know, it cannot attack a new person if they completely ignore it. Then why did it seem like it wanted to attack me? Sometimes, just thinking about it too much can inadvertently give it the necessary power. You're a good employee, but I don't believe you haven't given it a moment of your attention. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't find a flaw in his words. Finally, I agreed to the plan, told him the coffee shop's location, and waited. And yes, the creature found me, but it didn't attack, didn't come close, didn't do anything. I'm sure it wasn't smiling anymore because normally I would have noticed that hideous grin in my peripheral vision, but not this time. I rubbed my eyes, realizing I was still thinking about it too much. To kill time, I buried myself in my phone, scrolling through Reddit, trying to ignore the terrifying thoughts. Luckily, I didn't have to wait long. The coffee shop door opened, and someone walked straight to me and sat down in the opposite chair. "Hello, employee. I hear you're having trouble with the watcher." I looked up, recognizing a young accountant from downstairs. I'll call her Daniela. "Daniela, why did the boss send you?" Before I could finish, she cut me off. "I mean, we're about the same age. I don't think someone so young would have much experience with this." Daniela kept a serious expression for a few more seconds, then let out a soft laugh. "Don't worry, I'm not offended. It's understandable to wonder. Let's just say, I encountered the Watcher a few years before I started working here. I wanted to ask for more details, but realized she probably didn't want me to know." "So, what are you going to do to get rid of the Watcher?" I asked. "Nothing." Nothing at all." "That's right, nothing at all. But I tried ignoring it, and it ended up hating me." "Then you didn't ignore it enough. Don't worry, I'll handle it now." I looked at her, stunned, impressed by her simple yet firm confidence. She was so calm, even though she knew that monster was lurking nearby, and she looked at me without a hint of doubt. "I should free you from it. You probably don't want to know what happens if it gets too much power." After saying that, Daniela stood up and walked straight towards the creature, which had been standing in the corner of the coffee shop all along, unnoticed by anyone. But somehow, Daniela saw it. Perhaps because we were talking about it, she was drawn to it too. As she passed by, she glanced at it briefly, slowing her steps a little. The angry expression on its face returned to a hideous smile with each step she took. Then, in the blink of an eye, the Watcher vanished. Since that day, I've tried not to think about it anymore. No more blurry shadows flickering in the corner of the hallway or the room every night, but who knows, at any moment that could change. Even writing this story is a gamble. The next morning, I called my boss and told him I was no longer suited for the job and would feel safer if I quit. Perhaps this sounds a bit extreme, especially since everything ended well and I was quite good at following the rules, but the thought of something living in your house for weeks on end, uninvited, constantly provoking you with a hateful smile, something you dare not look at, but know all too well it truly isn't worth it. I was threatened, and my family was also at risk of involvement. No job is worth gambling your life or your sanity. My boss didn't stop me. He understood, and perhaps he was used to employees leaving frequently. He said he would handle all the paperwork and give me the bonus he mentioned. This was probably their way of preventing people from spreading rumors about the company and the strange things that happen there, but I wasn't too worried because 99% of you reading this won't even know what that restaurant is, so they probably won't be exposed. Before hanging up, my boss reminded me that I would receive one final email from HR. I thought it was just resignation papers, but he said it was a list of rules I needed to remember for a short time after leaving the company. I immediately panicked, but before I could ask, he reassured me that it wouldn't be too difficult. I thanked him for the opportunity and ended the call. I'm sure you're curious about the contents of that email. Here it is, verbatim. To former employees of Company X. We regret to see you go, but hope your time working at the company provided you with valuable lessons and experiences. Although you will no longer need to follow the rules in the office or restaurants, there are still some regulations that only apply after you leave your position. Please adhere to the rules below as you once followed our regulations for at least 1 month after your termination. 1. Every night before 11:00 p.m., place a plate of food with a portion of any raw meat outside your front door. We recommend chicken breast. By morning, it will be gone, but don't worry about who or what took it. If someone other than the intended recipient takes the meat, you will not be penalized. Please inform housemates to avoid taking that portion of meat for their own safety. 2. Any knocking heard at your window at night needs to be ignored. Only those who have worked at Company X can hear it. Looking outside while the knocking continues is strongly discouraged. 3. A few times each week, you may encounter small, fairy-like creatures. They are very friendly and bring joy, as long as you do not comment on their size. 4. If you hear a knock at your door at a normal time, you may open it as usual, unless the knock is simultaneously accompanied by knocking at the window. Similar to window knocking, only former employees of Company X can hear this. 5. If you open the door and see a cheerful man in a green suit with a briefcase, immediately refuse everything he offers and close the door. 6. Do not host parties at home during the period these rules are in effect. This is often considered an opportunity for others to blend in, and you certainly don't want uninvited guests. We understand that having to follow additional rules in your own home can be inconvenient, but it is all temporary. As long as you comply, everything will return to normal as it was before you worked at Company X. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact the CTO. Thank you for your dedication. I exhaled as I finished reading the email. Nothing at this company was easy, but at least this set of rules seemed the most manageable. It's been a few days since I officially left, and everything is still fine. I met one of those fairy-like creatures. It was quite cute, like a woman with a shell around her body and translucent wings, like a flying turtle. It appeared in my toilet bowl, quite a shock, I must say, then invited me to lunch. I agreed, thinking it best not to offend strange creatures. The window knocking is a bit annoying, but luckily, I don't need to stop my parents from checking it out. I absolutely don't want to know what's knocking and will maintain that stance. As for the man in the green suit, I told my parents I'd met him once. He was a very aggressive salesman. My dad hates door-to-door sales, so I trust he'll flat out refuse and close the door in his face. The raw chicken at the door is a bit harder to explain, as my parents certainly wouldn't be pleased, but luckily, they rarely use the front door, so I just secretly put it out when no one's looking. Usually I'm still awake at 11 p.m., so I can check if it's still there. It might sound mundane, but that's pretty much the end of everything. I don't think anything truly terrible will happen with these basic rules. Thank you all for your suggestions, help, or simply for embracing my story. Thanks to you, I've seen something good come out of that job. If you ever look for a job somewhere and find it unusual, please ask for clarification. If they don't answer, run immediately. No amount of money is worth your sanity or your life. And if, by some misfortune, you end up working for the same company I did, don't assume reading this will keep you safe. I was simply very lucky many times over. Those entities are constantly changing. Even the most detailed rules can become useless one day. Anything can happen that even the most experienced person has never encountered. At that point, you can only hope you make the right choice. I have to emphasize this because of what happened today. When I heard a knock at the front door, I thought it was the man in the green suit because my house doesn't expect guests. Had I been negligent or careless with the old rules, the outcome would have been different. But instead of a stranger, I opened the door and saw a familiar face. He looked directly into my eyes as the door opened, without blinking once. I looked back, waiting, praying for him to repeat that terrifying question so I would know how to handle it. And just as he spoke, even though I no longer worked for Company X, I calmly reassured him. I'll create a support ticket for that.